This is section 1.7 part B. We are writing piecewise functions. So in this lesson, we're going to be given some graphs of piecewise functions, and we are going to be writing the equations for those graphs. And we're just going to dive into our first example. So in this situation, we have a bathtub, water level in a bathtub over a given amount of time here. So if we look at our axes, we have gallons of water on the y-axis, and we have time on the x-axis. What I'm going to do is I'm going to fill in a few more numbers. So it looks like our time is going in increments of 1, and I don't know what that means, maybe 1 minute. So 2, 3, 4. And then our y-axis, our gallons, are going by 25s. It's just going to help us out to have those written in. Okay, at that point, we have 4 different sections. So it's going to be nice if we kind of maybe color code and number our sections. So section 1 is our blue one. Section 2 I will make green. Section 3 I'll keep as black. And then section 4 will be red. Okay. Piece interval, that is our x's. Okay, so it's the x values for which our piece starts and ends. So our first piece starts here where x is equal to 0, and it ends, I can draw a straight line, right here where x is equal to 3. So our first segment, our first piece, is from where x is equal to 0 to where x is equal to 3. Okay, so including 0 and including 3 and all of those x values that come in between. Our second segment starts when x is 3 and finishes when x is equal to 6. So between 3 and 6. So all the x's are greater than 3 but less than or equal to 6. Our next segment, we're probably getting the idea here, starts at 6, ends at 8. And then our final segment from 8 over to 10. All right, next thing, we're going to list our leftmost points and our rightmost points. We've already done our x values. We just need to go through and do our y values. So our leftmost point of our first segment is at 0, 0. And I'm actually going to tackle the rightmost point at the same time here. Our rightmost point is over 3 and up 100. And I'll go through and fill these in. Green one starts at 3, 100, goes to 675. And then from 675 to 8, 175. And then from 8, 175 to 10, 175. Okay, the point of doing all of that is so that we can easily find all of the slopes for these equations. Obviously, if you're writing an equation and you're writing it in y equals mx plus b form, you're going to need that m value. So I am going to do a little scratch work here. For segment 1, if we are finding the slope, we're going to use 0 for x1, 0 for y1, 3 for x1, 100, x2, 100 for y2. So if we're finding the slope, we're going to follow that slope equation, y2 minus y1, so 100 minus 0 over x2 minus x1, so 3 minus 0, which is going to be 100 thirds, which isn't very pretty, but we're just going to leave it that way. So m equals 100 thirds. And you could have just done that from the graph, looking at the graph, up 100, your run is 1, 2, 3, 100 thirds. That's probably just as easy, if not easier. Okay, keep going here. The green one, segment 2, maybe I'll just do that one from the graph. Maybe I'll just do the rest of them from the graph. Looks like we're going down 25. So negative 25. And then our run is 1, 2, 3. Once again, we went from 3 over to 6. So 3. And again, can't really do much with that. Can't reduce it. Don't need to turn it into a decimal or anything like that. The black one, segment 3, rise 25, 50, 75, 100. So we're going up 100, and our run is 1, 2. So 100 over 2. That one we can simplify. 100 over 2 is 50. So our slope is 50. And then the red one, segment 4, that one is super simple. Your slope is flat, so it's just 0. All right, last thing then, the equations. Now, the only thing that we don't have here for our equation is our b, our y-intercept. We've already found all of our slopes, so we can use all of those, but we need to find our b's. Now, some of these are super simple and are going to take us no time at all. So, for example, our first segment, our line actually touches the y-axis. It's right there. So our b is simple. It's 0. So our first equation is just y equals 100 thirds x plus 0, or just, I would just leave it off. You don't need the plus 0. So we're done with that one. Green one. That one is also going to be pretty simple, because if we were to keep following this green line, so if we went left 3 and up 1, we can keep following that pattern, left 3 and up 1, and we're going to see that if that green line had kept going, it would hit at 125. So for our second segment, our b is at 125, and I can tell that just from using the graph. So plus 125. The black one, that one's going to be a little bit more work. If we tried to keep following this line back, we're going to end up way down here, and I don't know where that's going to hit, nor do I really want to find out. Okay, so what we can do is we can just use some algebra and figure it out that way. So I'm going to start with y equals mx plus b, and I know that I want to find the b. That's what I don't know. What I do know is I do have a y value, I do have an m value, and I do have an x value. So where I'm going to find those is in either one of these points that we picked out. Either 675 or 175. It doesn't matter which one you use. I'm just going to use the first one because they're smaller numbers. So 6 is my x, 75 is my y, and 50 is my m. So 75 equals 50 times 6 and then plus b. We don't know what b is yet. At that point, pretty simple algebra. 50 times 6 is 300. Subtract 300 from both sides, and we're at negative 225 equals b. We're done. Go back up to where you're writing your equations. Y equals 50x minus 225. And that makes sense. If you had followed this line back, it would be way down there in negative land, way down at negative 225. Okay, last one is super simple. The red line, it does not have a slope. It does have a y-intercept. So if you're thinking kind of the whole process, y equals no slope, 0x, plus that y-intercept, which is 175. You don't need the 0x. That looks weird. Nobody ever writes that. Just y equals 175. And that's enough. Okay? Last thing is you need to put all of this stuff together in one nice piecewise function. So you are going to write f of x equals, you're going to make a giant bracket, and you're going to list out each of those equations. So 100 thirds x. You don't need the y equals because that's right here. The second one was negative 25 thirds x. And what was that one? Plus 125? The third one was 50x minus 225. And our last one was 175. And I put semicolons after each of them. Sometimes you'll see commas, sometimes semicolons. Doesn't really matter. Last thing is just filling in all of those intervals. So our first one was from 0 to 3, 3 to 6, 6 to 8, and 8 to 10. And that's it. Don't put the bracket on the other side. That right there is the final answer. All right. Second example. There's something a little bit different that happens in this one. So it's a shorter example, but there is one little catch on here, so I want to make sure we go through it. I'm not going to go through that whole grid again. Instead, what I'm going to do is just start with the f of x and the big bracket. And then I'm going to start by setting up those intervals. So for this first piece, I'm going to make it red. It's a little different than the last example because the last example, we started when x was 0 and we ended when x was a certain number. In this case, it's going to end at where x is 4. But in this one, we don't stop when x is 0. There's an arrow pointing to the left, which means that that line is going forever to the left into negative land. So it's going all the way back until negative infinity. So how would you write that as an interval? Well, I think the easiest way to write that is just your first interval is for all of the x's that are less than or equal to 4. Okay. There's a couple different ways to write it. You've maybe learned other ways to write that interval, but for our sake right now, x is less than or equal to 4 is just fine. The second piece is just like what we did in the last example. It has a clear starting point and a clear ending point. It looks like it starts when x is 4 and ends when x is 7. So between 4 and 7. And then the last one I'll make green. It starts when x is 7, and it goes forever to the right. So basically, it's all x's that are greater than or equal to 7. Okay, now we need to write those equations. The first one is super simple. It's just a horizontal line. Our question is, where is the y-intercept? And it looks like it is at 50. So that's all we need to do. Don't think too much about that. No slope, so no x's, just 50. Okay, the blue one. We probably have the most work to do on the blue one and the green one. So segment 2, I'm just going to find a place to do a little scratch work here. First thing we want to identify is the slope, and I'm just going to use the graph to do that. So from start to end, we need to go up 25, 50, 75. And our run is 1, 2, 3. So 75 over 3. Okay, now we got to figure out where that y-intercept would be, and I don't think it's going to be super easy to find. Maybe we can see where that is, but just for the sake of the algebra, I'm going to do it that way anyway. So first thing you want to do is pick a point on that line. So I'm going to pick 450 as my point. 4 is the x, 50 is the y. Use y equals mx plus b. Substitute in 50 for y, 75 over 3 for m, 4 for x, and we don't know what b is. Okay? Then we got to multiply these things out. So 50 equals 75 times 4 is going to give us 300. 300 divided by 3 is 100. Subtract. And negative 50 is our b. Now we can go up and put that into our equation. Y equals 75 thirds x minus 50. And that one is done. Okay, the blue one looks like our slope is down 25 and over 1, 2, 3. So m is negative 25 over 3. And then if we want to figure out what that y-intercept is, maybe we could count backwards, but I'm just going to do it the algebra way. Choose a point. So maybe 7 and what is that? 25, 50, 75, 100, 125. So 125 equals negative 25 over 3 times 7 plus b. And that's kind of nasty. 125 equals, let's see, 25 times 8 would give us 200, so it's negative 175 over 3 plus b. And then we will add negative, no, not add negative, add 175 over 3 to both sides. And if we want to work on our fractions a little bit while we're at it, if we want to add 175 thirds to 125, we're going to want to multiply 125 by 3, make it into thirds. So 375 over 3 plus 175 over 3. And that will give us 550 over 3, which is approximately 183.33. So not a very nice location there for a y-intercept. So final equation, negative 25 thirds x plus 183.33, and I'd be fine if you left that as a fraction as well.